New update. AITA for wanting to go nuclear. After my sister-in-law kicked out her teenage sons, my husband and I are dealing with a tough situation involving my sister-in-law, Barbara, and her 4 sons. Barbara has had a rough history with relationships. Her husband is a deadbeat who relies on her. Recently, her 2 oldest sons started skipping school and eventually got kicked out by Barbara. We wanted to step in and report Barbara to CPS for what she has done to the kids, but the rest of my family thinks we should resolve it internally. Hey everyone, my husband, 34, and I, 36, are in a tough situation with my sister-in-law, Barbara, 41, and we need an outside perspective on whether we're overreacting or if our stance is justified. We're leaning toward the latter, but are open to thoughts. Thanks in advance. Barbara has 4 boys, L 17, O 14, R 13, and C 7. Despite her having a rough history with bad relationships, her kids have always been well behaved. The only constant man in her life has been Reese, 48, her on and off husband who does nothing for her or the kids except work. He blows his money gambling, cheats on her openly, and relies on her for everything else. For 7 years, she's come to us, venting about him, swearing it's the last time, but always goes back. In 2020, after yet another huge fight, the entire family intervened. We sat her down and told her we were here to help with anything she needed. Lawyers, a safe place for her and the kids, even handling the legal stuff if necessary. She agreed to kick him out, but within 6 months, he was back because he couldn't find a place to stay. This grown man, who has worked a steady job for 20 years, somehow needed help. Since then, things have gotten progressively worse. Barbara decided to stick with marriage counseling, even though the whole family urged her to leave. She's clung to the idea of honoring her marriage despite the toxic environment. As a result, her kids have started to suffer. The eldest, L, started skipping school and smoking heavily. A few months ago, my husband got a 2 a.m. call from L, who said he was suicidal and afraid to act on it. When we got to their house, we learned he had told his stepdad the same thing, and Reese told him to just do it because no one would care. My husband, understandably, punched him in the face. We took L to the hospital, and after his release, brought him home with us for 3 weeks to help him recover. Eventually, L returned to his mom's house, thinking things had smoothed over, but they quickly fell apart again. Soon enough, the second oldest, O, began having issues too. For months, they'd been fighting constantly, and we didn't realize how bad it had gotten until we couldn't get in touch with either of them. Barbara had gone silent. My husband showed up at her house unannounced, something our family often does for fun, only to find out that she had washed her hands of L and O for being disrespectful and kicked them out. She had even turned off their phones and didn't know where they were staying. We found out that they'd been crashing with friends for weeks, trying to stay under the radar because they were embarrassed. We picked them up from school and brought them home with us again. They told us that their mom and stepdad had been bullying them, constantly fighting, and that they didn't feel safe going back. Barbara admitted that she put them out, but insisted things weren't as bad as they made it sound. Now, my husband and I want to go full nuclear, report this to CPS, the police, and anyone who can intervene, but the rest of the family wants to handle it internally. We feel like 2 minors were abandoned, and that deserves an extreme response. But the family is now saying we're overreacting, and at the end of the day, these are not our children. So, are we the assholes for wanting to report this situation and not leave it to family discussions? The 2 oldest boys are with us for now, but we're ready to escalate this. Update. We called the police. Thank you all for the support. Update 2. It's been nearly 2 weeks since I made my original post, and it's been a wild ride. I have to be incredibly vague because of the newly opened case, but here's the most important thing. All of our nephews are safe with us. The boys have always had a place here and have visited often since they were tiny, long before any of this chaos started. So while the transition has been emotionally jarring for them, the move itself was thankfully smooth. Now, as for Barbara and Reese, they're facing charges regarding their treatment of the boys. It was worse than we originally thought. Barbara seems remorseful, but my husband is still livid. He believes she's only feeling sorry now that everything's out in the open and consequences are on the table. Whether her remorse is genuine or not, I'm just relieved we took action when we did, because it's terrifying to think how much worse things could have gotten if we hadn't. Family-wise, everything is a mess. The entire family is split over this, and it's not even worth the text to go over the thoughts of those who oppose us. Those who have sided with us, however, have been a tremendous help. Even though there are a lot of family issues and the logistics are complicated, fuck it, we made the right decision. What I can share in more detail is that soon after I posted, Reese showed up at our house, demanding that the boys return home with him. They refused. I told him to leave, but he escalated things, got loud, aggressive, and started cursing at me and the boys. My husband wasn't home at the time. He was out picking up clothes and toiletries for L&O. I can only assume Reese felt emboldened by my husband's absence, because out of nowhere, he sucker punched me right in the mouth. And read it, I'm not ashamed to admit, I saw red. I swung back. It wasn't smart, but I did. He wasn't expecting that. I'm nice and really, really easygoing, but I guess I forgot that. I jumped on him, and let's just say he didn't expect a fight. I might not have landed the best hits, but he wasn't prepared for one at all. He scrambled out of there and sped off. I immediately called 911 while the boys called my husband, who thankfully was just around the corner. I'm fine. Just ended up with a busted lip that looked worse than it was, though my husband insisted I go to urgent care. The police met us there, and that's when we reported everything. Reese's assault and the whole situation with the boys. Reese and Barbara were picked up the next day, and in the middle of all this shit, I found out I'm pregnant. Yup. While I was at urgent care, they ran a routine test and boom, positive. I had no idea, no symptoms or anything, but it's still super early. All things aside, thank you for all of the comments, advice, and ideas. Your support made a difference, and my nephews are safe. Story 2, new update. Husband sends money to former female classmate. A little more than a year ago, my F-36 husband, Terry, M39, ran into his former classmate, Jenny, F-39, while he was in the next city over for work. Jenny had backed her car into his, and when they were exchanging information, Terry recognized her name from high school, and they got to chatting. Now, Terry is a very charitable person, and he and his family are very financially secure. So after chatting with Jenny, he decided to cover all the damages, both to his car and hers. He told me all about it when he got home that evening since, according to him, Jenny was in very rough financial shape. Her husband had left her, and she was raising 2 small children while trying to work lousy jobs. Because of her situation, Terry also electronically transferred $2,000 to her at that point in time. I didn't care then because, given Terry's salary, $2,000 is virtually pocket change. I also felt bad for Jenny because Terry told me that she used to be a relatively normal upper-middle-class kid until her parents got divorced when they were in the 10th grade, and she began to spiral. Now, Jenny lives mainly on social support and food banks. The city that Jenny lives in is about a 2-hour drive away from us, and Terry usually has to go there a few times a month for work. During these times, I know that once he helped Jenny deal with a horrible landlord by threatening legal action against him, he helped her eventually move to a better area. He got her car fixed when it broke down, and during that time, he also drove her to a clinic because her younger child was ill. Like I said before, Terry is a very generous person and will often go above and beyond to help people, even complete strangers, so I wasn't too bothered. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little uneasy about all this. For starters, since meeting Jenny, Terry has been doing more work in that city. It has gone from 1 to 3 times a month before Jenny to 11, 14 times a month sometimes, and his work requires him to stay 2 or 3 days in a row. He's been making more money as a result, but it still doesn't sit completely well with me. Also, since Terry gave Jenny his work number, I've never seen the messages they send each other. Even if it was his normal phone, I wouldn't pry, but at least then I'd have the option. A few days ago, we got a new washer and dryer, and I paid for it using my Visa card. Before he left for work, Terry logged into his online banking and told me to take the money I spent out of his account. When I did, I got curious for whatever reason and decided to browse around. From looking at his previous transactions, I found out that he's been sending Jenny $3,500 per month since February. I was shocked by this because Terry made no reference to this to me at all. Sprinkled in there were a few additional payments ranging from $900 to $2,200 with messages associated with them. I copied a few, and some are new rain jackets for kids, kitchen set, insulin for your sister, MacBook. I was pretty shocked by all this, and honestly, I didn't even know what to do or say, and I honestly can't even begin to describe how I feel about it. I've told 2 of my close friends, Amanda, F-37, and Lindsay, F-36, about this. Amanda thinks this crosses a lot of red lines and that I need to demand to see Terry's work phone and tell him to stop taking jobs in that city. Lindsay thinks that approach is too extreme and thinks I should just ask him about what I saw and then determine my next steps from there. Honestly, I don't really know at this stage, and I'm starting to feel both panicked and numb at the same time. WIBTA for confronting him? Update 1. A few hours ago, I made a post about my husband sending money to his former high school classmate. I took the advice from the comments and began to look through her social media profiles. To be perfectly honest, I didn't see any red flags so far. I asked my friends to do the same, but so far they've turned up nothing as well. I haven't confronted my husband yet about it since he's still at work, but don't know if I should bring it up tonight. He does have plans to go to that city on Wednesday to work and will only be back Thursday afternoon. For those wondering, he always stays in a hotel during his stays, and I have seen the transactions for those payments on his account as well. If anyone has any more advice, I'd greatly appreciate it. Update 2. Hello everyone. I'd like to provide another update regarding my husband and his classmate. After talking things through with my friends and reflecting on the comments I'd received, I decided it would be wise to start prying into Terry's life. So, on Tuesday, when he came home from work, I waited for him to jump in the shower. Once I could hear the water running, I grabbed his keys and snuck out to his car, where he keeps his work phone. After a few attempts, I got it unlocked and read through his text messages. Most of the texts he'd sent Jenny were generic. The first few pertained to him getting information from her to send her money. These dated around the time of the car accident, and them talking about what I'm assuming are people who used to go to their school. The messages were few and far between, only a handful spread out over weeks, sometimes months. To be honest, nothing struck me as affectionate or inappropriate. In fact, Terry's tone was uncharacteristically formal, while Jenny's replies were maybe just a hint dismissive and almost seemed annoyed. Also, while Terry would respond to Jenny's messages pretty quickly, she'd often take days to respond to his. I took screenshots and sent them to Amanda and Lindsay. Both of them agreed the messages weren't particularly alarming based on how far they were spaced out, but both thought that Jenny was somewhat annoyed as well. But the most confusing thing for them as well was how formal Terry seemed to write. They both said it didn't even sound like him. Also, both recommended that I stay quiet and not tell him about the messages. Yesterday, Wednesday, after Terry left for work and headed off to the city, I waited until nightfall, then drove the 2 hours to surprise him at his hotel. One of my friends had floated the idea that the hotel room might be empty, just a cover for whatever he was doing. But when I got there, Terry was in his room. There was only one small bed, nothing out of the ordinary. My friends thought there'd be a large bed. Terry was somewhat shocked when I walked in, though. I don't know why, but I think he was suspicious. After we spoke a little, he abruptly told me he needed to go to bed because he had work in the morning. This morning, I couldn't wait any longer, so I finally asked him about Jenny. I told him about seeing the transactions, and Terry tried to minimize it. He claimed that it wasn't as much as I was making it sound. I told him that it was too much to be sending on a regular basis, and then he said that he was attempting to rectify the multiple significant harms he's caused Jenny in the past. He then went on about how while now he tries to be a kinder person, in his teenage and preteen years, he'd been what he called a demon child. I'd heard bits and pieces of this before, mainly from offhand comments his parents had made. They'd hinted at how difficult Terry used to be, and I'd noticed how uncomfortable he'd look when those instances were spoken of. But given how empathetic and generous Terry is today, I never pressed for details. Every time I tried to ask, he seemed uneasy, so I'd always let it go. So here I am now, waiting in the hotel for him to return this evening. I'm going to have to get to the bottom of this, despite Terry acting like it's a tooth extraction. One thing Terry always jokingly tells me is that I don't know him. I honestly never even considered him saying that seriously until now. I just hope whatever I find out isn't that bad. Comments. Commenter. It's time to hire a PI. OP. At this stage, I'm honestly considering it. Commenter. Sounds like he assaulted her or caused damage to the point it was probably settled out of court, and he probably has to send her money for the rest of his life. Commenter. I agree, there is history there, but it does not mean it was assault or anything like that. It could be all sorts of things. Maybe she got pregnant and he pushed her into having an abortion, which she now regrets. Or maybe he caused her to loose out of some life opportunity, perhaps a college scholarship or something else. Commenter. Your husband was a terrible bully to Jenny in school. He either grew up and changed naturally, or had a eureka moment that showed him how shitty he was, but never took the right steps to try for a permanent fix. Therapy for himself and apologies for his victims. Now he's come across one of his victims, and he's wildly overcompensating for his suppressed guilt. That's why she seems annoyed with him. She doesn't want him in her life at all, but the money's good. I don't blame her for that. Story 3. AITA for hosting a divorce party with my daughter the day my divorce proceedings against my cheating ex-wife were finalized. After almost a year, my divorce proceedings got finalized, and I was happy that it was finally over. My ex-wife had cheated on me and had an emotional affair, and that was the reason of the divorce. We also have a daughter who's 14, and she knows everything that happened. I hosted a party the day my proceedings were finalized, and I invited a couple of my friends and my sister over. My daughter was in the house too, and she seemed to be having a good time. We had nice food, drinks, dancing, karaoke night, and it was a good atmosphere. My sister also recommended we could burn the wedding photos I had and my wife's gifts, and it was a great suggestion. We even cooked s'mores over the fire. The next week, however, my ex-wife called and asked why I had done that, and that she felt degraded and humiliated, especially since we did it in front of our daughter. I told her our daughter was unaffected by it, and in fact, she seemed to enjoy participating and throwing away the gifts in the fire. I told my ex-wife her issues are her issues, and to not involve me in them anymore. Was I the AH? Relevant comments. Commenter. Yeah, you can have all your parties, but involving the teenager is below the belt. I speak from bitter experience as a former teen of divorcing parents. Commenter. Divorce parties are for the adults. Involving the kids speaks to a high level of immaturity. YTAOP. There is also a part of me can't let go of the fact that they cooked s'mores over burning items that probably releasing toxic fumes into their food. Commenter. I agree that kids shouldn't be entangled in their parents' business. Let kids be kids. But it's also important to note that OP's daughter knew about the affair and her mother's infidelity. She may have had anger of her own to get through. After all, infidelity doesn't just break up marriages, it breaks up families too. And this teenager just lost hers. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest ones. Have a great day.